Okay, welcome to One Grounds Management's fourth module in the training for fall of 2017. We're really excited about this particular module because here's where some of the tools that we've developed are going to come into play. Some of you are probably going to say, "Oh, you added another step to the app," but it actually is a tool that will help you be able to determine what it is that you need to do on site. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and just select my app here and open it up. I've already signed in, so all I have to do is, let's say that I show up on site. I've already got a site here that I've picked out. You're going to go ahead and pick everything like you normally would do, and I'm just going to select this site. It's pretty typical of a lot of our sites. If you're putting this in and you're doing it on site, you don't have to change the date and the time. They are what they are. If you're putting something that happened before, you'll have to make sure that these are correct. We need to make sure that these are correct. So now the first thing you're going to notice is there's a new addition here on this very first startup screen, and that is we've added in this button for snow. It says snow, but it means it's for de-icing, anti-icing, snow removal, whatever winter service that you're doing, that's what it's for. So select that, then hit start service. And this is where the big extra step comes in. And this is where you're going to need to know what type of service it is that you're doing. If you're showing up there before a storm to do anti-icing, you're going to select the anti-icing option. If you're there after the storm is done and you've done all your snow removal and you're there to just put down some de-icing material to make sure that it stays safe, you're going to select the de-icing. If you're there just to do snow removal, you're just going to select the none and move on. Let's assume we're there to do a de-icing, so I'm going to select that option. And then here's where the ambient and surface temperature come in. These were both on the previous video for the ice and science training. You want to make sure that you're putting them in the correct spot because it's going to affect our calculations. So for the ambient temperature, it's usually colder than what the surface temperature is. So let's assume that that's probably 28 degrees, and our surface temperature was, with our IR gun, it says that it's 30 degrees. So we're going to put those in there. Surface temperature usually is warmer than ambient temperature. So once you've got those in there, then you're going to choose the conditions. Let's assume, and you've got a full list here, let's assume that it's just clear because we're just there to do a de-icing. Now, here's the really cool part of this next step. These were all little extra things that you had to do, but here's what's really cool about it is because of that information, we've been able to calculate down here what the needed materials are. You'll notice that there's a calculation for rock salt, calculation for magnesium, and a calculation for calcium. Some of you may be using something different. A liquid is going to have a different need here. That's where understanding, if you do liquids, that's where understanding how liquids and granular are different and what's the same, what are the properties and how do you equate the two together, that's where that's going to be important, but we'll leave that up to you. This is just for granular. This is for granular application. And what this calculation does is it takes the surface temperature and the square footage of this particular site that's in GM squared and calculates the need of ice melt if there was a 1/64th of an inch layer of ice across the entire surface that we have marked in GM2. That's the calculation. It's a calculated amount. It's not a specified amount. It's not a recommended amount. It is, here's what's calculated based on what we know. It's a starting point for you. If you show up there and it really is black ice and it's a nice thin little sheet of ice across the entire site, these calculations work. If you show up there and there's a couple low spots in the parking lot, these calculations may not work. But they give you an idea as a contractor as to what should go down. If you have half of the site that has water running across it from the next door site because stuff is melting into your parking lot there, and you need to put extra ice melt down, then put the extra ice melt down there. That's where you're going to need to put extra ice melt. Again, these are calculated amounts. If you're putting down an amount that is significantly different then what's calculated here, we really ask that you put a comment. If you don't, you may get a phone call from our area manager saying, hey, the calculated amount says this. You don't have anything in there that indicates that it needed anything other than something close to the calculated amount, and you'll have to let them know anyway. So you might as well put in the comment. We'll go over that a little bit later, but this here is just their calculated amounts based on specified conditions. They're not specified amounts of what you should put down. So let's go ahead and we've got this information in here. We're going to hit save. And then on the next step, you've got your ticket started up here just like we wanted. If we open that up, we're going to see that those same calculations that we just saw on the other one, they're here. So that way you can always refer back to them. Let's say you start the service, you start getting underway, you knew that it was 29 pounds for the parking lot, but you forget what you were supposed to, what the calculated amount was for the sidewalk. So you can always open this up and say, oh yeah, it was 6 pounds, but there's a bunch of extra ice over there, I'm going to put 10. Whatever it is that you're doing, this isn't a specified amount. This is the calculated amount based on specified conditions. Knowing that will help you. Now the other thing that will help you is seeing these calculations are based on a de-icing service. If we had selected anti-icing, these amounts would be about a third less. Or I'm sorry, they would be about a third of what you see there. So instead of 30 pounds, it'd be about 10 pounds, 9.5 pounds or something like that. So pay attention. It'll show you that it's a de-icing service, and here's how much should go down. Most of you are probably using a magnesium product, which is what's specified at a lot of our locations. So make sure that you're following that one and not the rock salt one, unless you're using rock salt on a location that we allow rock salt. But this is the one that you're probably mostly going to use. Once you have this going, we know that, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and stop this service now. So I'm going to hit stop. And we know that we're doing snow and ice management, so we'll select that. Now this should all look familiar. This really hasn't changed. A little bit of it has changed, but not much. You're still going to select what it is that you did. Let's say that we were here for 4 minutes, and I'm putting 4 in because that's about the time that we were there. And then, and some of you may not have to put any time in. Some of you may. I think I have it set up with this particular test service partner for times, but then you'll have to select your material. I have a couple of test materials here. They don't really exist, but they're kind of fun. St. Peter's Pearly Melters, I'm going to select that for the sidewalks, and the calculated amount was 6 pounds. Let's say that when I was there was some extra ice around the entrance and I wanted to get rid of it, so I put down 8 pounds. That's fine, as long as we know. So I'm going to save that, and then on the parking lot, let's say that, you know what, that took us 4 minutes as well. Let's use my best stuff material, and let's say that I think that was 29 pounds. Let's say that it only took 25 pounds. When I get done, I can go here, select the site conditions, which I can say were black ice, and I can say, yeah, the service times were all correct. There was no snow. It was all just ice. Now, because I put down amounts that were different than were calculated, and some of them, the 25 as opposed to 29, it's not significant. Let's say I put down 10 or whatever. You need to put a comment. If it's just a couple of pounds off, no big deal. We don't expect you to break out a scale and weigh anything out. It's more just, here's the point of reference of what this should take given specified conditions. If there's different conditions there, then you need to, at least you have a frame of reference. So in here, let's say, hey, there was extra ice at entrance. That's all I have to put, and that tips off, oh, okay, well, as my area manager is looking through things to make sure everything's correct, he's going to see that you put down a little more than what's calculated. Oh, well, that's because there was some extra ice at the entrance. No big deal. Save that. For the parking lot, let's say that there wasn't any ice on the parking lot, and it only took 10 pounds, even though it calculated out to 29. The point is that the calculation is there to help you manage the ice that goes down, so that we're putting down really what is needed and not putting down extra ice melt that may cause an unsafe situation, because when it gets wet and there's too much ice melt there, it becomes slippery, or there's too little ice melt and we know that there was too little ice melt. We put down too little of ice melt on purpose because there wasn't any ice. Well, then we have a comment as to why. We can say, yeah, they didn't need what was calculated because there was only a little bit around the entrance, or there was only a little bit around the ADA ramp, or whatever it was. And then once you've added that, you can say, okay, now I'm going to put in my photos. You're going to make sure that you put in photos. We always ask for photos. I don't know how to stress photos more than it will save you in the end if you just take the photos. We've worked with some consultants recently that have told us story after story that subcontractors would have been saved from lawsuits if they did just had a photo of what they did and what the conditions were. It just is so helpful. It's helpful for you. It's helpful for us. It's helpful for our client. Ultimately, all of this in the end is to protect us liability-wise. We are performing a service that has specific liability and safety issues tied to it. We need to make sure that we're doing everything to protect ourselves, and that's why we're doing this, is to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and able to show our client why they're paying for something. They can see that the calculation, here's the calculated amount, here's what we put down, here's why we put down more, here's the photos to show the ice from the leak next door, here's the photos to show all the runoff from the site next door. And those are things that we need to know. Those are things that our client needs to know, because it helps them to budget. It helps them to understand where their costs are. So we can't stress that enough. I just want to say thank you to all of you. You guys have been great to work with. I've gotten great feedback on the app. Hopefully this extra step is not too cumbersome for you. And I really hope that the calculation really helps out in doing the stuff that you need to do and giving you a good point of reference. So thank you for all your work, and I look forward to a great snow season this year. And let's go get them.